Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and I'm just going to turn comments on for people who join. This is the 4th of February 2025. So we are at, this is the beginning of um, Jupiter direct. Jupiter has gone direct today. And so this is going direct in Gemini. So with this direct motion, we are now moving into Sam. Hello, good afternoon. Good to see you. Glad you finally can make it on. Glad you're there too, because that tells me it's working over on YouTube. Okay. And Alex, good morning. Nice to see you and Sam on at the same time again. Yeah, just talking about how Jupiter is moving direct. And it's so yeah. Now, one of the things that was interesting, I was watching a little bit of that Stefan Burns live stream yesterday, and I don't know if I talked about it because I think I watched it after I did the live stream today. But he was kind of looking at because we talked yesterday about the big financial crash here in the U.S. and yeah, there's a lot of unrest in other places too. We've also seen presidents stepping down in like Germany and France and in places like that. So the unrest is something that's certainly been a topic, and I had watched a little bit of Stefan Burns' video on that, and he was talking about how he showed basically, I think it was a crypto crash, and usually when that happens, that is something that precedes a bigger financial to do. So yeah, so there's a lot that's going on, and I had a number of conversations with people yesterday. Everybody's really tense and on edge, particularly in the USA, about a lot of changes that are going on, especially around people who are trans, people who are this idea that we're going to get rid of anything to help disabled people, get rid of anything for diversity. Like companies don't have to do anything to help, the disabled, and like there's all of these kinds of policies that are being put in place, and people are just really upset. There's all these trade wars with everybody, and there's a lot of anti-American sentiment around the world. I was talking to somebody last night who was like, "Oh my God, I don't think I can travel, anywhere, not even Canada, because people hate us." And I'm like, "Well, just be careful. I mean, don't. I mean, I definitely understand how everybody feels." And Suda, good morning. So yeah, there's been a lot of that's going on, and and again, amidst the planetary shifts, we have talked about how Venus retrograde is happening. So it's interesting, like we said, you have this financial collapse. Well, no, Venus retrograde's not happening. Let me correct myself. That doesn't happen until March 2nd, but we have kind of a pretty long pre-shadow period here. So you have, so again, going back and reviewing what we value. No, I'm not. Thank you. Hello. So it's like sounds like part 2 of a Billy Joel song is what Suda's saying. Yeah. So basically things are not in good shape right now. They're like I said, things are definitely, people are definitely feeling the pressure. And if you recall in previous live streams, what I had said is that this is a time when things are going to get worse before they get better. So a lot of people need to kind of bear that in mind, that this is not a time and a situation where where we've got to this is not a time and not a situation where we need to panic, I guess is what I'm coming down to. Now, obviously, people who are in certain communities are feeling very, feeling pretty threatened and put upon right now. And I don't blame people for feeling that way, because these are some things that seem to be directly targeted. And it amazes me the number of people who are surprised by this, because they're just kind of like, "Oh, well, I didn't expect this was going to happen." And people I know who voted, like for Trump, and they're like, "Oh, well, I didn't think he was going to really do that." And I'm like, well, like, he's a man you can take at face value. You can definitely take him at his word, So anyway, yeah, it's interesting. But with Jupiter moving, okay, Jupiter and Gemini, though, there was another interesting thing that I think I had spoken about, where Britain was talking about AI, and they were talking about passing a law that was going to allow Britain to basically, and the corporations in Britain were going to be allowed to access all British information on the internet because Keir Starmer wanted to be an AI superpower, right? And I think, from what I've heard, that bill was killed. That didn't actually happen, but a lot of people were very, very upset about that for very good reason. And I bring it up because it was an example of Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, because Gemini is the area in which, along with Aquarius, where we are thinking about AI and new technologies and artificial intelligence and so forth. That is definitely the domain of both Mercury and, that is the domain of Mercury, and that is the domain of, what you call it, and of Aquarius. But but to think about AI with these kind of delusions of grandeur, to not really understand what it is, that's Jupiter retrograde. That's kind of looking at it in a, because Jupiter, when it's retrograde, can bring delusions of grandeur. It can bring this idea that somehow we are bigger than what we are, that we are going to that we get ideas and they're off the wrong track and they go in the wrong direction with stuff. So in any case, so right now we have Jupiter moving direct, and tomorrow we've got Venus moving into Aries. And Venus in Aries is not a particularly comfortable place. Because this is, Venus, again, has to do with the idea of the heart and with luxuries. And Aries is definitely a very warlike kind of an energy. So the idea that one might go to war over one's luxuries, right? Or one might, be, aggressively, trying to defend one's turf, perhaps. But it also is something that can bring very raw emotions, very sharp emotions. And again, we think of Venus, and it's funny, we think of Venus and Mars as being kind of the lovers. In fact, Venus and Mars in mythology, in both, whether you think of it Aphrodite and Aries, or whether you think about it as Venus and Mars, their child is called Harmonia, which is interesting. When the two of them come together, their child in mythology, it represents harmony. Although the actual story of Harmonia, she marries Cadmus, who is the founder of Thebes. And her story it's funny. She's called Harmony, but she has this very, rocky kind of a story, which is probably representative of just how difficult it is to maintain, or how is to keep harmony in a particular situation. Because obviously, when Aries and Aphrodite are, make love to each other, what happens is that, what ends up happening is that she's married to Hephaestus, or Vulcan, okay, who is not the most attractive of the gods. And she's married to him basically to try to kind of keep her under control to some degree. But she never, ever consummates the marriage with her husband. And basically Hephaestus catches her and Aries, doing what they would, her being unfaithful, basically. And he creates this net to kind of trap them so that people would see them. But it's funny because Zeus's reaction was, well, this makes you look worse than him. You know what I mean? Like it makes him just look like he's cuckolded or whatever you want to use the word is. It didn't go the way he had hoped. So in any case, Zeus, when Harmonia is born and then she is married to Cadmus, Hephaestus is told that he has to make his peace. He can't do anything to get revenge or to get back. So he makes her this beautiful necklace as a wedding gift. However, he is feeling a bit sore, and so this necklace is in fact cursed. The necklace of Harmonia is cursed, and anybody who subsequently has that necklace, I mean, it brings war, it brings fatality, it brings all of these terrible things. So it's interesting. It's almost like, Harmonia, with respect to Hephaestus or Vulcan, and you think of actually Hephaestus as representing technology too, because that's what the blacksmith was. He was the one who created the technology for that time period. So it's almost like the way in which this technology becomes like a curse to harmony, right? In some weird kind of a way. But we're seeing, yeah, but we're seeing kind of the movement of Venus and Mercury is going to be really interesting in the next few months, because when Venus and Mercury go retrograde, they're going to be going retrograde roughly around the same time, because probably by mid-February we're going to be looking at Mercury retrograde pre-shadow as well. And they were showing how when they go retrograde in the sky, they're going to be going retrograde together, which is actually not a normal thing. You would think that they're close enough in the solar system that that would be a regular thing, but it's not. And because normally, you know, like one might be a couple of signs ahead or behind the other one, but they're actually together. So Mercury retrograde, yeah, so that's happening in March. We're going to have all those retrogrades, and it's going to be finally something that kind of starts to all go direct again in early April. And when she does retrograde, she's going to retrograde back into Pisces. So yeah, and the reason I mentioned Venus too is because a lot of the upheaval right now seems to be around Venus and Venus energy. It has to do around money. It has to do around what we value, and things like that. And again, we do have this kind of very you know, aggressive energy and the appropriateness of aggressive energy that's coming into play. So, okay, with all that in mind, I did pull a couple of cards for this morning, and I used the essential oil deck today. And the cards that I got were, first we got soothing, okay, and the second one was monthly, and we kind of know what that's about there. Okay, so the soothing card. Okay, so the message of this card is, I need to fix this. Okay, I'm going to miss Venus in Pisces is what Alex says. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, I'm not, yeah, this could be a little bit of an uncomfortable time. And especially even if you don't think of Venus as having to do with love, if you think of Venus as having to do with finances and luxury and so forth. Again, a lot's going to depend on where this is in your chart too, and how they work in your chart, where they are natally and where they are by transit right now, what they are conjuncting in your own chart will make a difference here. Okay, so I need to fix the true statement here is I need to fix this, and sorry, the trigger statement is I need to fix this. The true statement is I'm willing to learn from this. It says lift yourself above your life situation and observe as a witness. Understand that you are so much more than the story. Okay, so starting with that thought. Okay, so being willing to learn, right? We're looking at a situation that is broken, or if it wasn't broken, it's being broken. And I think the first thing that we want to do is we want to rush in and see how we can mend things. Now, when you oftentimes when we fix things, if we're repairing something that's broken, you know, the fix, we talk about MacGyvering, right? You know, there can often be this fix that somebody has that that doesn't, you know, it's a fix that we often will have that doesn't really solve the problem. It's kind of the way that we deal with healthcare. It's the way that we deal with, you know, a lot of psychological issues. We deal with them by using Band-Aids, right? You know, well, if you may go to a doctor with a set of symptoms, and the doctor will tell you, oh, well, okay, for this symptom, I'm going to give you this drug. And for this symptom, I'm going to give you this drug. And for this symptom. And, you know, those are not the problem. Those are just the symptoms. Those are just the pain relief that you might be getting. But the underlying issue may be something else, right? So when we talk about fixing, we have to be careful that when we try to fix something that, you know, we may need to, this may be the reason for needing to stand above and see, okay, what's the bigger picture here? What's the bigger issue? Because what's going on the ground, so to speak, may only be symptomatic of a bigger problem. And we have the recycling guys here, so if you happen to hear that outside. So yeah, so I'm willing. So the idea say that I'm willing to learn from this. When we're looking at Jupiter direct, I think this is an energy of saying, okay, what's happening right now, and how do I, you know, what's happening right now, and how do I actually respond to that? How do I step back and say, okay, what's going on here in the big picture? We tend to look at individual things going on and just focus on one piece or another. Or we might focus on the pieces that affect us personally rather than the ones that are going on with the whole. But I think in order to look at the whole picture in terms of what's going on collectively, you have to kind of take a step back and look at the astrology going ahead a bit. And in terms of going ahead, and there's a lot to look at there. I mean, we've been told we are in for a tumultuous year. In fact, possibly a tumultuous 2 years. It's that when you're talking about major change in a society, well, first of all, if you try to look at that all at once, you can feel like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop all the time, right? And so everything that happens, you're like, oh no, now this happened. Oh no, now this happened. Like we're just kind of waiting for it. But I think what it's saying is, no, we want to learn from what's going on here, and we want to consider the influences that are in play, and look more at the long game, because this is something where, I mean, we can only do what we can do in the moment. But you need to think about, okay, what is the bigger picture here? Is what's going on going to be, we tend to think that when things happen that they are permanent. This is a permanent state of affairs. This is what's going on. This is going to be the way it is forever. And we're stuck with it. And now it's hopeless, and our life is going to now be this, or it's going to be that. And this is definitely not a year where it's going to be, where what you see now is going to be representative of how your rest of your year is going to go. In fact, what's interesting about the astrology of this month is that we're actually in a place where we're not, this is actually like we haven't even gotten started yet, really. I mean, the really superstar kind of aspects that are really going to, light things up in our charts and in the collective is happening. We're looking at March, we're looking at April, we're seeing stuff in June and July. But some of those aspects too, don't forget, are really good ones, like Jupiter moving into Cancer, and Venus moving into Gemini and conjuncting Uranus. Now that's actually a really good aspect. So we do have things that are coming up that are good. Now, it was interesting because I think, Suda, you were on yesterday and you had messaged me later about the 8 synchronicity, because she had a few synchronicities around the number 8. And weirdly, when I was doing my Serapis podcast yesterday, well, not the podcast, I was doing a live stream over on Katonia the other day, and it was about, I mentioned certain aspects about the Serapis podcast. I was talking about the background of that. And in preparation for that, I picked up my copy of Philip K. Dick's book, Valis, which is, it's a novel, obviously, and it's science fiction. But Valis is an interesting one because those of you who are interested in Gnosticism, when I've talked about the vision of the universe that Azrael has presented to me, because people who know that maybe people who are new here don't know that I work with Archangel Azrael. Azrael has the vision of the heavens and kind of the order of things, so to speak, as presented by Azrael, it fits more in with what you see in Gnostic texts. It's not exactly what's in Gnostic texts, but it fits in with that a bit more. So, okay, Valis is interesting because it shows, it's this guy, he's called Horse Lover Fat. That's the name of the character. And he has like this mental breakdown, but then he kind of has all these revelations in his mental breakdown, right? But I knew that there was something that I had in that book that I was like, yeah, there was a phrasing in there that I thought was important. So what do? Okay, back to the 8 synchronicity. I pick up the book, I open up immediately to chapter 8, and literally what I'm looking for, and the word Serapis actually appears on chapter, one of the first words that catches my eye in chapter 8, because what that chapter talked about was that what we are doing here, I think in the bigger picture, what we are trying to do is get away from time, okay? That the problem is time, and the way in which time can entrap us, or our conception of time. We need to move above our conception of time and move out of the repeating cycles. In a way, you might even consider it a little bit like the Eastern idea of getting off the wheel of samsara to some degree. It's like the idea of we constantly, but as a society, we get in a loop and we do the same things over and over and over again. So, so again, this is not just a matter of fixing things in the moment. It's not just a matter of, I mean, yes, fixing laws, fixing policies, fixing things like that. And Leela says, one of my favorite books, love me some Philip K. Dick. Yes. Yes. Actually, I remember you also read Valis, and that is my, I mean, I know he's written a lot of things, his stuff was the, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was the basis for like Blade Runner and stuff like that. Like, yeah, Philip K. Dick. And there was also that series that came out on Amazon in the last, probably, I'm saying the last few years, it was probably like 10 years ago, like The Man in the Tower or something like that. But Philip K. Dick, yeah, he was definitely, well, he was actually, I think he was diagnosed as being on the schizoid scale. But he was a brilliant writer. And, sometimes that's why I often say 8 is technically a Leminski. Well, yes, exactly, Suda. It's this loop. And if you look at it sideways, it's the Leminski. And yeah, so it's, just what I was saying about the other thing. Yeah, when people are sometimes on the schizoid scale, I know that a lot of times we just say, oh, well, those people are delusional and they need to be on meds and this and that. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like you're often dealing with people who have some filters that are off. Like when I mean off, I mean switched off. I mean, our minds are basically giant filters. Our minds are there to filter out the, they're meant to, our minds are meant to filter information. They're not really meant to expand our view of things. I was talking a little bit about that yesterday too, because again, it kind of related to the podcast I did on Serapis. Serapis is another one of those bridge figures between ancient religion and modern. And probably some people say he's one of the models for Jesus, but when they're talking about the model for Jesus, they're talking about the Sol Invictus model of Jesus, which is Jesus as the unconquerable son. And that's the one that turns Jesus into this warrior who makes everybody submit, which is the way in which he ended up being politically used for empire. That was not what the original Christ myth was about. So, but that's kind of the way that developed. But I often feel that people sometimes on that scale, when they see things and they observe things, and we all go, oh, well, those people are just, they're just crazy. They don't know what's happening. They don't see. It's, I feel like, no, I think sometimes they're perceiving something that is just not accessible to us. And I can't prove that. Okay. But I do sometimes kind of feel that way. Like, okay, I was talking about the mythology of there's another, I'll call it a mythology. It's more of a galactic mythology. The people who are into all the starseed and ascension stuff will tell you about, the idea of the Pleiadians and the Draconians. And there's all these messages about like these intergalactic councils, and that humans became an experiment of the Draconians. And that therefore there was idea of like, let's have a race of beings that has no knowledge of anything. Like, in other words, that they're created so that they can't cross dimensions, that they can't see the bigger picture. They don't know anything but what's there, which again fits in very much with a Gnostic vision that says this world was created by a God that had its head in the clouds and couldn't see that there was anything but itself. So those kind of things kind of go together. So this is kind of another, more modernized extension of that kind of mythology. But that's the idea, is that regardless of whether you believe any of that or not, the bottom line is that human beings are very limited. We like to think that with our consciousness and our rationality, that yeah, we're great, we know everything, we're awesome. And actually, our consciousness tends to act as a prison. It tends to be a thing of like, I can't comprehend this. I can't move beyond it. So I'm afraid of it and I must stay away from it. If it's something that makes me feel uneasy, it must be something evil, right? It must be something that I have to stay away from. And again, we all do have an inner instinct and an inner sense. There are faculties we can develop to a certain degree. But again, this involves trusting that kind of inner light that we have. Like, that's what the Gnostics were talking about, like that inner light, that inner spark. You can call it a spark of divinity, but that thing that connects us to everything else and tells us what's really going on. But we have been told to discount that. Like, oh, no, you have to worry just about what is rationally in front of you. So, so when this card comes up and says, I'm willing to learn from this, lift yourself above the situation and observe as a witness, observe that you are much more than the story. Yeah, because these stories, and that's it. When we talk about the loop, we're talking about looping around in the same story. We're talking about looping around the same story over and over and over and over again. And basically what this is saying is, like, as I said in the other one, no, this is an opportunity to finally go, wait a minute. No, we don't need to repeat the loop. We don't need to, we can break out of this circle, and, now maybe we're creating a new cycle or a new circle. Okay. Because maybe that's just the way things work, but a new cycle is being created. We don't have to assume that we're stuck in the same. Curiosity too is helpful, is what Suda's saying. Oh, sure. Absolutely. Being curious about new things. I often recommend to people who are not familiar with Robert Anton Wilson. He wrote what they called the Illuminati trilogy, but he was a very interesting guy. They call him R.A.W. Raw, for short, Robert Anton Wilson. And you can find some of his lectures here on YouTube. But he is fascinating because he would talk, one of the concepts he talked about, because he was a physicist, he was a comedian, he was a writer. Some people say, like, have you ever heard of the Arisian religion, which is the Principia Discordia and all that, which I will sometimes talk about over on Catonia, because it has to do with the worship of goddess Eris, the goddess of chaos. I mean, I have a copy of the Principia, and it's absolutely hilarious. I mean, it's meant to be, people say, is it a religion disguised as a joke, or a joke disguised as a religion? But in any case, people like him were very, very profound thinkers. I mean, people may have looked at him as kind of like a stoned hippie or something like that, but the thought that he came up with was very, very profound. And one of the concepts he always talked about was the reality tunnel. He said, we all live in a reality tunnel. And we might call it a bubble. It's kind of that space that we're in, of kind of like, this is my narrative, and this is the track. This is the track, if my narrative is like a train, this is the track that I'm on, right? This is where I'm going. This is where I'm following. And the idea is, he's saying, you need to get out of your tunnel. You need to explore other tunnels. That's why he would say, I mean, nowadays this would probably be extremely stressful, but if you have one political point of view, examine the other one. Think about what other people are, or if other people have points of views that you literally cannot understand or are antithetical, it's like, try to think about where they're coming from. Like, what are the other point of view? What does the other point of view look like? Not that you have to accept the other point of view, but trying to, I think that's why a lot of times what we do, and certainly people will call this a kind of defense mechanism, is when somebody does something, we try to get inside their head. Like, why would you do that? But it's a defense, but it's also, because sometimes that's hard to do, because oftentimes we're just reflecting our own feelings back on that person. That's the thing that you have to be careful of. Like, if I was in this person's shoes, this was what I would do. But that's not necessarily how they're seeing it. They're seeing it in terms of their own life experience, their own narrative, the things that they're afraid of, right? The things that they don't get. And so, yeah, so the idea is that you want to expand your horizons. When people talk about shutting down borders, when people talk about, disconnecting with, when we want to other everybody else who does not belong to a certain group, that is a fear response. That says, I am afraid of the world, and I am only, I'm only allowing my world to be this big, and everybody else is on the outside and is the enemy. That's xenophobia. That's the fear of people. It's the fear of the world. But this is saying, no, you don't want to be afraid of people. You want to get outside that. You want to consider other points of view. But a lot of times people think considering other points of view means that you have to accept them, right? And good morning. Considering other points of view means that you must accept them, and that is not the case. You need to. I think I've talked about the modality in academia called critical empathy before. And critical empathy says that you understand people's feelings as valid, okay? That people's belief systems and whatever, even if you look at them and go, I totally don't get it. But at the same time, you do have the right to critique them. It doesn't mean that empathizing with somebody doesn't mean you have to think they're right. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's kind of that's something that seems to be very hard in today's world. It's kind of like, if you don't agree with me, then you're my enemy. And that's a little bit of a problem here. So there's definitely this energy of trying to get to look above, to look at the big picture, get above the situation. Now, the other card we have was the monthly card, okay? And the key word on this is receptivity. The trigger statement is, I am guarded, what we were just talking about, right? The true statement is, my heart is open. This is a time for you to receive new information, Open your heart to receive it. Literally what I was just talking about, right? And so back to Robert Anton Wilson for a minute. He was talking about the idea, one of the things he had said, and I know I'm paraphrasing to some degree, is that there are basically two types of people in the world. There are those who embrace new information, and there are those who are afraid of it. And that becomes the thing. If somebody is afraid of new information, and again, there can be all kinds of reasons why somebody is afraid to receive new information. They could have suffered traumas when they were young. Or they could have something that's very idyllic, and stepping out into a new world is not someplace you want to go. A lot of times we assume that change happens because we're traumatized. Sometimes change happens because we're, sometimes we're pushed into change and we were actually quite comfortable where we were. If you think about the traditional hero myth that they have in Western culture, and again, this is just, I think this is a myth that's going to be questioned as well, but you have the idea of the divine child who was born, and Otto Rank connects that a lot to the Oedipus complex and the Oedipal myth, which is interesting. But you have the divine child, okay, in various mythologies and religious systems. And that divine child is often a threat to a king, an uncle, a father, somebody, right? That the child is a threat. And at birth, this child's life is in danger. Moses gets put in a basket and floated down the river, right? Jesus has to worry about King Herod, and then, so they flee and they go to Egypt, like Mary and Joseph flee and go to Egypt. Perseus, he's a threat to the father, so him and his mother get locked in a chest and thrown in the ocean. Like, there's all of these things that happen with these divine children. But then when they survive that, then they have this like pastoral, idyllic kind of childhood. It's like they're, raised among the shepherds in the fields, or, something like that. There's like this very, this almost like postcard kind of existence that they have. And then what happens is they reach the crisis. Something happens that breaks the idol and makes them have to, in Perseus's case, he's challenged in order to save his mother. He has to go bring the king, the head of Medusa, right? Jesus, when he goes out on his mission and then, encounters resistance, from authorities or from the Pharisees or the Sadducees or whomever, whatever it is, there's this element there that the hero, you have to leave your little idyllic place and you need to go out and do battle. Okay. That's an interesting Venus Aries kind of thing, if you think about it. But the question is, do we have to do battle? Joseph Campbell refers to that as the monomyth. And, and the idea is that the hero goes out, does battle, fights the dragon, maybe is in the underworld or the belly of the beast, comes out and finds the treasure that's hard to attain and brings it back to the community. That's always the part, whenever you see things like, if you watch action movies and things, frequently, especially in the 80s, that's not how things ended, okay? It would be, like, the bad guys come in, you've got your, whoever you've got, whether you've got Charles Bronson or whether you've got, I don't know, he's the first one that came to mind, your Sylvester Stallone or who's the other one? Chuck Norris, or one of these, who comes out and just like blows everybody away, right? That's not really the way that's not a heroic movie. That's not the way a hero myth works. The hero's not just out to destroy everybody that they don't like. It's meant to be, and I don't know, that I feel like has been a narrative that has taken hold, that's what it means to be manly, like that's what it means to be forceful. That's what it means to be, to have control and to be successful, is to destroy what stands in your way. And rather than figuring out, rather than negotiating these forces, it becomes a literal kind of almost good evil kind of battle. And that's the problem. We're split. We think it's either on the good side or it's on the evil side, and that there has to be this heroic figure, whoever it is, to step up and to beat the bad guys up. And that's not the reality. That's not what things are. It's not, this is not one of those movies, and that movie does appeal to a lot of people on visceral levels. And Sam says, never thought of it like that. Wow. Yeah, it's something. And I know that when I teach the Oedipus myth in mythology class, the first thing I'll always ask my students is what constitutes a hero. Define a hero for me. Define what that means. And of course, they always have something like, oh, this person has all the best qualities and they're a hero and they're exceptional at this and exceptional at that. And I said, actually, the definition of a hero is it's somebody who's actually very flawed. Heroes are very flawed. They always have a fatal flaw. And when they come in, the hero is somebody, okay, so the question that I followed up with after they would answer that question is Oedipus a hero? Okay, so what does Oedipus do? If you're not familiar with the Oedipus myth, I think most people are. They've heard about it in some walk of life. But Oedipus is born, his name means swollen foot, because he is the son of the king and queen of Thebes. They receive a prophecy from the oracle of Apollo that says this child's going to kill his father and marry his mother. And so they're like, oh, we don't want anything to do with that. So they pin his feet. That's why he has swollen feet. And they expose him. They kind of like have a shepherd take him out to be exposed, which was a pretty normal thing that they did at the time when they didn't want a child. And basically it was, oh, if the child manages to live, then it manages to live. But we didn't exactly kill it. We just threw it outside, kind of like we do with bugs and stuff, right? So that was kind of the idea. But the shepherd feels really sorry for this baby and instead takes it to the neighboring town of Corinth and gives it to the king and queen of Corinth, who named him Oedipus after his swollen feet. And they take him on as their own child, because I guess there's an assumption there that he must be a royal child if he was put out. And so as he grows up, there's like this drunken party that goes on, and somebody's like says, yeah, they're not your real parents. And then he of course is puzzled by this, because he's always assumed that these are his parents. And they say, oh, don't listen to that guy, he was drunk. But he's troubled enough that he goes to the oracle of Apollo, and he gets the same oracle. You're going to kill your father and marry your mother. And he's just like, whoa, I'm not doing that. So he is like, I better leave Corinth right away. So what does he do? He gets on the road, and in probably one of the first documented cases of road rage, there's another chariot that overtakes him and kind of pushes him to the side, and he gets in a fight with the chariot driver, kills him, does not realize that the man he has killed is in fact his father, King Laius. So he gets to the gates. As he's traveling, he gets to Thebes. That's the next city. That's his birth city, right? He gets there. He meets the Sphinx. He responds to the riddle of the Sphinx. And then, and because he is able to answer the riddle and the Sphinx goes away, and there's a whole lot of symbolism around that too, which we won't get into, but he is then declared the hero. And, oh, you have saved the city from this monster. So our king has been killed, but you will become our king and you will marry the queen. So now he is married to his mother. He is completely unconscious of all of this. So, so then when there's a plague sent on the town because the murderer has not been, the murder has not been avenged, he's determined to find the murderer. And when Tiresias, the prophet, comes in, it's kind of like, okay, then he slowly discovers the true narrative and that the murderer is in fact himself. So he puts his own eyes out and he leaves the city. So the question is that a heroic act, right? Because a lot of people look at Oedipus as this horrible, disgusting human being who murdered somebody and then married, and then committed incest, right? And so that's the way that's often looked at. But the thing is, this is a person who went out of his way using his rational mind, and his parents using their rationality to avoid what was fated. If they truthfully, weirdly, if they had left the whole thing alone, it probably never would have happened. But they felt like, no, we're going to be proactive. We're going to take steps to avoid this. And so there's at least two other plays. There's Oedipus at Colonus, and then there's Antigone. There's two other plays in the series about Oedipus, because Antigone is his daughter, and it's kind of what happens with the battling in Thebes and all that kind of stuff. But Oedipus, at the end of Oedipus at Colonus, there's the implication is that he has what they call an apotheosis, that he is actually taken up bodily, like into the heavens or whatever, that he actually becomes a god. And it's said that after whatever city he dies in, that city will always be victorious. So Thebes, of course, wants him back at this point, and he's like, no, I'm not ever going back to Thebes. But yeah, it's interesting. It's the fact that we oftentimes try to use our rational mind to do things, but we're not really able to see what the big picture is. And a lot of my students say, oh no, well, he wasn't a hero. And I'm like, yeah, but he had a flaw. And the thing about Oedipus is that when he realized that he was in error, he acknowledged the error, and he took steps he said, okay, the right thing for me to do is to pay the penalty for this. How many people now do wrong things and they just think like, oh, well, screw it. I got away with that. I'm not gonna do anything about it. I got away with it. A hero isn't somebody who evades their responsibility. A hero is a person who accepts whatever's before them and accepts the results of their actions, right? So I don't know, but the bigger question is whether or not the hero mythology is something that we need to that needs to continue in this culture. If you're on Patreon, I do special podcasts at certain tiers for Patreon, and I did a Patreon recently on Amaterasu at Sam's actually. What you call it, suggestion. And actually, Sam, I should probably try to share that one with you. Just, I know you're not at that. I know you're kind of on as a free member there, but I should probably share that one with you because you were the one who suggested it. But we talk about the myth of Amaterasu, the female sun goddess. And it's interesting because her myth seems to center around weaving, around taking the disparate threads and weaving them. And even when there's chaos, she's very tolerant of chaos. But when it really becomes, overbearing or too offensive, she just withdraws. She basically just withdraws her light until she is coaxed out again. And then the perpetrator is made to be, accountable. But it's interesting. We like in the myths of Mount Olympus, you have this idea that, there's this battle to battle between the Olympians and the Titans, right? This is a battle to contain chaos. This is the battle to bring order and civilization to the world. And in this other myth, there's no battle. The sun goddess doesn't make war on anybody. Everything is done through negotiation. And the thing that they're doing is the weaving. And it's when the weaving is interrupted that she gets upset, right? And Sam says, I would love that. Yeah, I should, because you are the one who suggested it. So I'm like, you should at least be able to hear it. So yeah, it's, but that's it. And I'm remembering my grad school professor saying to me that if there was an alternate narrative for this culture, like if there was a feminine hero myth, it would be the myth of weaving. How do we take all of these different experiences and encounters and weave them into one tapestry? So anyway, I've talked about that a lot. Here's our reading. And our center card, literally, what were we just talking about? Possibilities, flying above, right? Looking at the big picture. And that card did actually come up for me earlier this morning. Possibilities. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is what the essential oil cards were talking about. Possibilities, getting above, seeing the big picture, not just looking at it from the ground, because from the ground, it looks one way. We need to kind of get up and see the bigger picture. Now, the inner feeling of which we're unaware is the laziness card. It's the 9 of Cups, right? And now, again, 9 of Cups is usually a very, very good card, but it's kind of a card of self-satisfaction. And what it means, as you can see, again, anybody who's new here, we've got this guy's kind of here. He's got his pina colada, and it's almost like he's on the beach kind of thing. And he's looking out over this black and white order. It's like, I know what my world is, and I feel comfortable. This is where I'm at home. But behind him, you see everything is breaking up. And that's what this card is about. It's like saying a lot of times when we have a certain narrative, especially as I said in the beginning, one that we feel like has worked for us for a long time, we don't really feel any inclination to make a change. We don't feel any inclination to get away from it, right? So we have that. And the external feeling of which we are aware is this is the Justice card, breakthrough, okay? Breakthrough is, there's something breaking down. And when we're talking about justice, we're talking about balance. How are we rebalancing things? It's interesting because one thing that Azrael had said to me about the influence of death in the world is he said, death is not there to punish. Death is not there to, it's not a personal act. Like when the angel of death comes, it's not because the angel of death has it out for you. There's nothing personal about it. Death comes as an act of balancing. Okay, so when changes come, it's there to create, it's these kinds of things come in. We have these things that come in that disrupt societies because there is an imbalance. And so this is about how are we going to rebalance things, and the old heroic idea of doing it doesn't really cut it. And I think we're seeing the problems with that, with that story. Now, what is our advice card? Is the no thingness card. Okay, again, Hierophant. Hierophant, okay. First of all, in traditional decks, Hierophant has to do with higher level of commitment. Okay, looking at things, taking the next step, being committed to the path, being committed to, because again, if you're talking about being committed to a spiritual path, and it's also, by the way, has to be any kind of higher level of commitment, anything where I say, okay, I'm going to invest in the thing that is meaningful to me. But if we think about it in terms of the 9th house, if we think about the Hierophant as higher spirituality, the spiritual path is not an easy one. A lot of times we think we're on the spiritual path and it's like, oh, it's all going to be spelled out for me and it's going to be easy. And I just don't have to think anymore. I can let the religion do it for me. And I'm not saying people here do that, but that sometimes people will have a very good initial experience. That's how conversions happen, right? They have some kind of an epiphany or some kind of a moment, and something that makes people feel so wonderful and so alive in the moment that they say, oh, this is it. This is the path. But even though, yes, that path has the capability to make you feel alive and in the moment, you still have all these challenges to negotiate. You still have a worldview that has to be willing to be broken open and willing to change. So it's kind of like looking into the void. What are we looking into? Again, we've talked about that a lot. And a lot of times we don't want to leave our comfortable place because it means looking into the void. It's like, oh, I don't know what's out there. It could be, it could be a monster out there, right? And that would be going along with hero myth, right? But our outcome is, again, we're talking about freedom, the understanding card. Understanding that you are free. The cage is open. And so what I feel like is happening right now, okay, if I'm going to tie all this together to what's going on in the collective, I think a lot of what we're seeing right now, a lot of this attempt to, for power grabs, a lot of this attempt to rig economic systems, like a lot of the collapse and things that we are seeing, it's saying, understand that this is actually where your freedom is. There is a chance now to escape the loop. There's a chance to do something different. And we might, again, as I said yesterday, we may feel on an individual level like, oh, well, what am I going to do? Well, all you have to do is be committed to your path, be committed to where you're going. Now, again, our path could change. We right now, we could be rethinking our path, rethinking our identity. And that's something you want to kind of lean into as well. But you are basically in a space of where it's saying the cage is open. You now have the possibility to do something different here. And the thing is, though, I don't honestly think it's all up to us. I think these changes are going to happen whether we choose to change or not. But the idea is that you can come out of the cave. If you want to talk about Plato's cave, you can come out of the cave. You can move into this new space and you can do things a new way. Don't be saying like, well, gee, I'd love to do things a new way, but it's too inconvenient. It's more or less, because I think also when we talk about committing to a new way, we think it's going to be really hard. And I think it's saying, look, even if there's some work involved, you're going to be so happy with the result. You're going to be so happy with the difference. You're going to be so happy with how different your life is when you've made the change, when you've made the jump, whatever it is. It can be something on a personal level. It can be a move. It can be a change of job. It can be resolving a relationship. It can be a lot of things on a personal level. Collectively, I think there's this current that's pushing towards, no, we don't want to get back into the same old, victim savior model. We don't want to get back into the model that says, oh no, everything's falling apart. Help me, Obi-Wan. Although I don't think I'd want to compare leaders right now to Obi-Wan Kenobi, but it's like, yes, we do need the help of each other. But what you don't want is the strong man with the gun. That's not or the strong man who has the biggest army. That's not the way forward. And it's not going to be the way forward, is what it's saying. So we need to take heart and continue to follow our own paths and be joyful. That is the best way to overcome what is happening, to not let the attempts to limit or to restrict inhibit us, because the reality is that we're actually free. And that we can move around these things. It is possible to do. Anyway, we're at 8:18, so I'm going to stop. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate you coming on and flipping over to YouTube. Even whether I think it was a preference for a lot of people. For some people, it was not. So yeah, so that's our message for today. I hope you all have a wonderful, what is today? Tuesday? Yeah, I have a job interview today, so wish me luck on that. And yeah, and I will see all of you tomorrow morning, same time, or afternoon, same time, and catch up with you next time.